Meet Rob Nelson, talk show host.
Because you got the 70s thing going there. I got someone's underwear.
Robert Kennedy, thanks for taking a minute. Simple question.
Tucker, it's good to see you. Listen,
you're a Bitcoin maximalist. You're Bitcoin forever.
I hate this central bank digital currency.
Hey, I don't have all the answers, but together, I know we can find them.
hey everybody, welcome to the show. Happy Wednesday. Wow, stuff goes on every day. Isn't it crazy? There's so many fun, little, interesting things happening. So today, I'm not going to go deep dive into one thing, although I probably end up deep diving eventually. I'm going to go with some of the good, fun tidbits. Thursday, I'm normally Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but I was on a boat and couldn't make it work, so I decided to do a Thursday special. Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi is retiring. Now, again, I don't even know if you're political junkies or not. If you watch politics at all, most people probably couldn't tell you who Nancy Pelosi is. The honest truth. I mean, she is arguably, she might be the longest serving member of the House of Representatives. She's been in office in Congress since 1987. It's basically like almost 40 years. That's a long, long time. And, she was Speaker of the House for a long time. She was a polarizing figure, really ran the party. even with AOC trying to merge up, until Republicans took control of the House in the last election, she was don't mess with Nancy. And she always pretends she's like this like nice lady, right? I mean, she does this whole thing, this religious thing, she's also like 100. I mean, she's not 100, but I mean, you listen to her talk and move. I mean, she can barely move. The funny thing about these people, they all pick on somebody else for being old. Like Joe Biden was old. Joe Biden acted old. Joe Biden acted older than he was. Donald Trump's same rough age. He acts younger than he is. Nancy Pelosi's right up there. She acts old. She moves old. She sounds old. I think that we need to have she just needs a big I'm not a Nancy Pelosi fan. I never have been. This is not about being conservative or, enjoying the fact that Trump came into office, and disrupted things. Nancy Pelosi has represented the status quo and what's wrong with politics in America and what's wrong with Congress for 40 years. That's like 18 terms. All she did is get reelected and reelected and reelected. Can you imagine? That's a 40-year gig. Who has a 40-year job? Who does anything for 40 years? How long was Jay Leno on? 20 years? How long was Tom Brady a pro football player? 25 years? Who do 40 years, like it's old school, like you work for the factory and after 40, 50 years you retire. You start at 20, you retire at 70, I don't know, 65, whatever, and they give you a gold watch or something. I mean, she made her statement and she said, "There's been no greater honor for me than to stand on the House floor and say, I speak for the people of San Francisco." Let me parse this down. There's been no greater honor than to be able to stand in Congress and say, she was congresswoman from California, but also from San Francisco, from the Bay Area. I have truly loved serving as your voice in Congress, and I've always honored the soul of San Francisco. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace, the anthem of our city. That is why you, my fellow San Franciscans, to be the first to know I will not be seeking re-election to Congress. Nancy Pelosi doesn't get to say, Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. She always does this thing. She always acts like she's sort of this holier than thou and, praying for everybody and God's will. She's going to be one of the most ruthless politicians in America. And she absolutely took Joe Biden down. She literally took him out at the knees and pretended she didn't. Anybody who thinks Nancy Pelosi wasn't behind it, it's crazy. I mean, she was like, Joe's out. Ask him to leave. If he doesn't leave, we'll start having everybody write pieces about him and come out and start saying that he wasn't competent to lead anymore. But I thought he was. Oh, so I see. If he doesn't voluntarily step down because we know he can't win, we don't really care if he's competent. They could care. Give him an F if he was competent. They cared, could he win? They kept him in the basement the first term. He wasn't competent then, I mean, for the first election. So by this election, he was really not competent. And he was really deteriorating. They knew. They didn't care whether he could handle the job of being president. They didn't care if he was falling asleep in his lawn chair, his beach chair in Delaware, if he taking naps all day long and, minimizing his meetings. They didn't care about any of that. They didn't care if he could run the country. They didn't care if he could make good decisions. They cared if he could beat Donald Trump. And when he couldn't, when it became apparent for whatever reason that he couldn't, Nancy was like, you got to go. Let Joe know he's got to go. Well, Joe didn't want to go. I said this for a while. Why would he? Power, nobody likes to give up power. I think it's just a Trump thing. Nobody likes to give up power. George Washington gave up power. Nancy Pelosi, you of all people should know, you've kept your seat for nearly 4 decades. So, yeah. And you'd keep it longer if you weren't too old to do it. I mean, maybe, you're like, I'm not in power anyway. I'm not going to be the Speaker of the House, even if we do win. AOC will make sure that doesn't happen. I'd rather just, spend a few years doing something else. But she'd stay too if she could have the power. Power, power, power. So when Joe wasn't going to go, they didn't care that he couldn't run the country. They cared that he couldn't win the election. She was like, Joe has to go. And if Joe doesn't go, then all of a sudden everybody's going to start talking about and saying things about how he's really not fit. And they noticed him walking on the stage and he kind of bumbled off. And George Clooney, writing an op-ed and saying, oh, he didn't recognize me. And all these people coming out of the woodwork anonymously saying about Joe Biden's mental well-being. And he stepped away and Kamala was anointed. Now, here's the interesting part of that. Remember, I just said they didn't really care whether he could run the country. They cared whether he could win the election. When he wouldn't voluntarily step away, the only way to force him out was to admit what they already knew was true, that he can't run the country. So they lied about that the whole time. It's like they lied about stuff with COVID the whole time to keep power. And when they needed to make sure he left because he would risk losing power, nothing to do with competence, then they had to tell the truth that they've been lying about the whole time, that he's really not competent. But they didn't care. They just cared that that's how they could then get him out. And suddenly Kamala Harris became the most competent, the most capable candidate ever, which is a joke when you think about it, I mean, and had the Democrats had a competitive election, had they actually had a competitive primary, it's interesting. Oh, no, Trump wins. Might not, might be a lot closer. There were a lot of people who didn't want Donald Trump to be president. So I'm not convinced at all. I mean, RFK Jr. would have run against him. Now, people in the Democratic Party might say, well, we don't want RFK to be in our party. Well, too bad for you then. You don't want any of the people to be in your party who seem to be able to, you only want the fringe left. And you don't seem to want anybody who's capable of, having, some juice. I mean, RFK Jr., Elon Musk was a Democrat till a couple of years ago. Joe Rogan voted for Biden, the first time. Powerful voices, but they're not traditional. They're more out there. They're risk takers, Might even call them a little rebellious at times, or, outside the box, the cookie cutter box that Nancy Pelosi wanted to preserve. She lived right inside that box and took advantage of that box as much as she possibly could. That's the whole joke with her and making money. She and her husband, he was an investment guy. And, they were all, so many of them trading on inside stocks and all that. And it's hard to prove, but they did start a bill. Josh Hawley, I think, has a bill in the Senate called the Pelosi Act. That would ban members of Congress and their families or spouses from trading stocks while in office. Can you imagine if you're trading stocks while you're in office? First of all, you get all the inside information. Secondly, you're on the inside of the inside. You're in the House of Representatives of the United States Congress in the United States of America, the most powerful political institution there is, and you're trading stocks, and you get mad at Donald Trump for building his businesses. I mean, you can argue he's the president. Oops, I just went blurry. He's the president. He shouldn't do that. Okay, let's wipe the slate clean. I think I bounced into my camera. But I can argue none of them should do it. I mean, the idea that people should take a separate, and again, I don't think it goes one way. I think people are right to be concerned that Trump is making so much money while he's in office. And I'm not suggesting whether he's doing any of it illegally, but just using that power and that platform to be able to make more money. And he shills just about everything. But everybody in Congress, get off your high horses, because, you're all trading stocks and making money. So few white sheep in there, profiting off the system in so many ways and clinging to power. Meanwhile, Proposition 15 passed in California. So that means they can, this is the fun part. Democrats went crazy that Republicans were going to pass a bill in Texas to allow them to gerrymander. And as I've said before on my show, I won't repeat it 1,000,000 degrees, but gerrymandering is when you just cut up congressional districts to make sure more of one party's voters are in the district. So instead of having nice, even square boxes or whatever side by side, you make like a river. You gerrymander it. I think that's what the word actually means. It's sort of in my head. It always does, meander around. You cut it up so that you get more Democrats here, and some are over here, and some are here. oh, this little chunk here in the middle, this is some Republicans. We want to separate the Republicans so they can't have too many in one block. And if who's ever in power draws up those districts so that they work to their favor. It's been done forever. Sometimes it's ruled unconstitutional. But both sides do it, always have. So Republicans decided to do it in Texas to have some more secure seats, and they control the legislature in Texas. So sure enough, Democrats go crazy. The very same Democrats who'd been redistricting for years in other states and even had the Supreme Court toss some of them out in Texas and Michigan, Illinois, I mean, all over the place, redistricting efforts by Democrats, some successful, some not. But very bad, they said. This is very bad. This is how you hijack a democracy. This is the definition of hijacking a democracy. Okay, first of all, then you've been in a democracy too for the last 30, 40 years, because you do the same exact thing as the Republicans do. You both do it. So I guess you're both hijacking democracy, which fair enough. If you want to say we've all hijacked democracy, great. Then, just resign yourselves from office since you're hijacking too. Don't just blame the other side. But the crazy part is, so Gavin Newsom goes, California has a proposition that would prevent that from happening. It's a commission that's supposed to have a bipartisan look at. When I rock my head into my camera, I whack it. Yeah. It's supposed to have a bipartisan commission that decides to make them fair. And nobody likes whatever they come out with, and everybody goes to court anyway. But that said, Gavin Newsom decided, let's undo the proposition, and then we'll gerrymander state California so that we can match the Republicans. Okay, fair enough. So now can we all just admit you're all doing it? Two wrongs don't make a right, do they, Gavin? Oh, I guess they do in this case, yes. So we will move away from the bipartisan approach to carving out congressional districts to a completely politicized one in a completely politicized Democratic Assembly and Senate in California to gerrymander, because the Republicans did it in Texas, but the Republicans did it in Texas because and so on and so on and so on. Who did the first gerrymandering? I don't even know. I think Democrats did. But both sides have been doing it. So I'm just sick of the high horses. Nancy Pelosi, Gavin Newsom. You don't really have a high horse. Adam Schiff, especially. You don't have a high horse to stand on now. And you're the ones that stood on the highest horses. Now, when Republicans start standing on the high horse back, which they have done, I get really upset too, because it's like the Mandami stuff, right? Oh, this is the end of America's New York City as we know it. And, the guy, Jay Jones, one gun, two bullets, three people. And he texts a friend and he put both bullets in at the time the Speaker of the House of Virginia, maybe still is. And people on the right went crazy, like moral high horse. How dare he? And how can this man get elected, and especially Attorney General, when he's threatening killing other members of the political establishment? First of all, he wasn't threatening to kill anyone. He's making a reference, a joke that we all could make. Now, what? Our politicians, our political leaders, not allowed to make jokes? Everybody's swearing, by the way. Everybody's using the F word now, the F-bomb. They're all dropping it. Trump. Why don't Trump drop the F-bomb? They're all swearing. The F-bomb is the most popular one. Kamala used it the other day. This guy, so what? So he said that, he put, it's a metaphorical thing. It's like, it's like marry, fuck, or kill, it's that idea, like, which again, okay, like we're all so uptight. I don't really think he was inciting violence. I do think Mandami is going to do some messed up things in New York City. I don't think he's going to get a lot of them accomplished, to be honest. I'm not sure how he's going to pull them off. He's got to get some support from the state government in Albany. He's going to lose so many rich people. He's not going to have a tax base. I read somewhere, the people who like Mandami don't like paying bills. They're not big fans of paying bills. That's true. But I will give Mandami credit for one thing. He did what Donald Trump did. And in some ways AOC, but not a little bit. He really said the system is broken. It's rigged. It's not helping you. remember AOC primaried a Democrat. Mandami ran, yes, there was the guardian angel guy, was in the race as a token Republican, but this was really a battle of Democrats. And he took down the Democratic establishment, both the current mayor and, then the former governor, Andrew Cuomo, right? And he said the system's rigged, it's broken. It's not just Trump in his eyes or Republicans. The entire system is rigged. This is why I'm going back to the Nancy Pelosi's. They did rig the system. And like with letting too many people come over the border with immigration, when you rig the system against the average person, I've said for a long time, this is not really a battle of left and right, black and white. It's a battle of classes, of rich and poor, or of haves and have-nots. That's why I've said there's a union on the populist side of the right and the left. And it's how Trump could win working class voters and minorities and win upper class or rich people. Oddly enough, or not oddly, where Trump lost a lot was with well-educated, and a lot who voted for Mandami, well-educated white women in their 30s and 40s. Well-educated white women who seem to overall have found that they like this more progressive approach. It's not even really progressive in my mind, but they don't like the white man conservative guy. And in this case, the white man conservative guy and Andrew Cuomo, or Eric Adams, who's not a white guy, who's black, but like fundamentally wanted somebody different. And that's where Trump lost votes, and that's where Mandami picked up a lot of votes. So what'll happen in New York? The world won't come to a crashing end. It's not going to be all over. It's not going to New York will survive. New York always survives. It's got a soul that just keeps beating. However, and I don't know that it'll even hurt the Democratic Party as a whole. I mean, I will say the AOCs, the Mandamis, the Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is the one who I think said the Democrat. No. Somebody said about kicking all the sort of the rebel types out. Bernie Sanders. They kicked Bernie Sanders out. He's trying to be on the ticket. Hillary's like, no. Went like that. So, I don't think New York comes to a screeching stop, but I do think he tries to do some policies that won't work. Price controls never work. What are you going to do? And government run grocery stores? That's not going to work. Putting price controls, tell people how much they can buy, how many low eggs you can buy. You can't. The crazy thing is we've seen how economic socialism really plays out, and it only works in sort of hybrided ways. So it didn't work with healthcare in London, although in England, it did provide healthcare for everybody, really inferior healthcare that took often forever to get, could be denied if, especially if you were older or something, you might not get certain, but could also be denied. If you ask any doctor in just out of med school or going into the practice who are English, they will tell you what a nightmare it is. Even how they're assigned to where they get to go, what hospital they have to go to, and they'll all say the whole thing's a nightmare. Now, did we do much better? No, we had free market healthcare hijacked by insurance companies who've hijacked Congress and the Nancy Pelosi's. And so they came up with Obamacare, which was a lie from the start. You were never going to get to keep your own health care. And they tried to create a sort of socialized healthcare system in the US that's not really and didn't really work. And it won't work. And now they're fighting about keeping those subsidies going. And that's why the Democrats won't open the government up. So on and on the problem goes. The policies only work. Even China, which is a communist country, has a market-based economy. I mean, what Mandami's trying to do isn't going to work for the most part. That said, why he's trying to do it is because the system, to the average person, the system feels rigged against them. They feel they are getting screwed. and they don't want to get screwed anymore. And that comes from the right and the left. And this whole notion of like Trump's billionaire friends, like Joe Biden had a working class friends. I mean, every president surrounded by elites with money, all of them, every single one, and have been for a long time. I mean, go back. It's maybe Jimmy Carter. I don't know. Maybe Carter. Ford. I don't know. He was sort of an odd one, but I don't care. Nixon, Johnson, Kennedy. Probably even Eisenhower. Eisenhower's a weird one. He was he was the supreme commander of the Allied forces, wins World War II, becomes president. I don't know. He's the one that actually said the system's rigged, the military-industrial complex, and he ran the armed forces for the biggest war in our country's history. And he was like, "Watch out, because they will infect Congress in a revolving door that will just keep them making money at taxpayers' expense, even if it's not needed, and they will argue it's always for your safety." That still goes on, and Mandami's not going to succeed with the policies, but he is succeeding as a candidate, and he's the future, just like Trump was. And some of Trump's policies aren't going to work, but just like Trump, he's an outsider who's like, so the system's not working in your favor. I think Trump's mistake is he's not doing enough to deliver on the day-to-day aspects of that. And some of what he wants to do would work, unlike Mandami. I mean, there's only so much you can do with grocery store prices. And I will say Trump's tariff policies, I think, are smart long-term and are bringing a lot of investment down the road into America. They're good for the American economy. But people are voting for what's good for them tomorrow, next month, paying bills, my current job, what happens to my kids right now? Like, how do I pay rent, utilities, gas, food prices? That's what Mandami gets. And Trump ran a little bit away from that and hasn't delivered. And he's made himself target for the Democrats to say, well, he hasn't delivered on these things. And long-term tariff stuff, okay, whatever, that doesn't count in their eyes. So definitely something to think about there with what Mandami represents. And for Trump and his team and all you diehard Trumpers to realize that he needs to put, if his sole focus is like on the tariff stuff and the international peace stuff, which is good for him to do and needs to be done, especially, but he also this big ego and he likes to do it. And it's great, like some of it's great. He sort of forgot about Ukraine and Russia, right? Remember that whole war? Remember how that was the biggest story? We all just sort of forgot. Meanwhile, they're killing people left, right, and center every day, right? You never know. Even good old CNN barely would tell you, It's so far in the rearview mirror of news. Hamas is still out there, so Gaza and Israel still in the news for now, although nobody's really given much news on the peace deal. Like, occasionally they break the ceasefire. And probably before we know it, in a week or two, Israel will be rolling tanks in and finishing Hamas off, and then it'll get some more news. But, Trump's focus on these things, it's somewhat mercurial is what I'm saying. And is the obsession with deporting everybody, as I've said before, it's just not, I'm not okay with it. And it's not humane, and it's not kind, and it's not fair. I don't care if they came over the border illegally 20 years ago. So would it get you for any crime you committed 20 years ago? I mean, first of all, it's a civil offense, right? So I don't care if you want to make them pay some penalty, but you can't just go scoop people up out of their jobs and their houses and their, schools and whatnot. It's just not okay. And what I've said, and I'll keep saying, the reason it won't work is not even that you can't convince me in some weird way that it's the morally right thing to do on the high horse and they broke the law after all and da-da-da, which again, I said this would happen. I said that Biden letting everybody flood, like literally like Disneyland, come on in, but it's free. A week of 4 years of free Disneyland, everybody comes running over. We won't stop you and we'll give you benefits and we'll take you to new places. And wow, yeah, okay. I said this backlash would happen, but that doesn't make the backlash right. And the reason it will backfire is because you are now ripping people out of their communities. And the people who are all for throwing the scumbags back, the criminals, the drug dealers, the gang members, the rapists, the worst of the worst elements, and for that matter, just about anybody who's come in the last 3 years, because you don't get, sorry, you got in on the free Disneyland thing, bye-bye. But when you rip their community members up, when you rip their neighbors up, they're real neighbors. They're people they've built relationships with. They get mad. And it doesn't matter if they're Republican, because then they're like, it's too far. So I'm hoping Trump backs up a little on that. I don't have a lot of time. And Mandami's not going to succeed at a lot of what he's doing, but he is breaking the mold for a new kind of leader, which Trump did as well. Like I said, AOC a little bit. But the system is rigged. Nancy Pelosi's exit is perfectly timed. And finally, just because I want to squeeze this in, well, let me say, Nancy Pelosi's exit is perfectly timed. After 40 years, couldn't come at a better time. And as Mandami sort of rises to be the first openly Democratic socialist mayor, who's pro-Palestinian and at least marginally anti-Jew of the biggest city of Jews outside of Israel, couldn't make these two things up at the same time. The map is changing. The old guard is either dying or being shoved out. I think there'll be a similar thing in the Republican Party too. Trump doesn't last forever. And I think a new version, and that might be like the turning point type thing, the conservative that, more Christian based, but doesn't have to be Christian, but a new group of leaders is going to rise up and emerge over the more traditional Republicans, the same way it's happening with, the more so-called progressive. I don't like calling progressives because most of them aren't progressives, but the so-called progressive left over the more traditional mainstream Democratic Party. I've said forever, I wrote a book about it years and years ago called Last Call, 10 Common Sense for America's Biggest Problems. You can probably still find it somewhere. It's on Amazon still, but it costs you like $3 at this point. Random House published it. I said then, like 2 decades ago, that we, 15 years ago, whatever, we were heading for this cliff, and our political parties are both broken, and they're corrupt, and they're self-serving, and they serve the interest of the party and the members, and the people they supposedly represent is only a marginally next down the road. And the minute they win office, they're running for re-election already. So they have to then play to the corporate interests and the donors who will get them elected and all that. And that's where the system is busted. And that's why people feel like it's rigged. And that's why it's good riddance to Nancy Pelosi, who I will just say as a sidebar, like, if you want one more fun tidbit for the day, Tesla shareholders approve Musk's $1 trillion pay package. Woohoo! 1 trillion. That's the times we live in. It's more complicated than that. It's a shareholding thing. He keeps us like 13% of shares. That's what the shares are estimated to be worth, depending on the market cap and performance gains. But they wanted to give him the compensation because they're like, he's the innovation. We don't want him to go focus all his energy on SpaceX. He said something interesting. He's like, I wanted enough voting power that I could be dangerous, so to speak. I could have influence, but not so much that you couldn't fire me if I was insane. But nonetheless, $1 trillion compensation package. Wow. Happy Thursday.
Meet Rob Nelson, talk show host.
Because you got the 70s thing going there. I got someone's underwear.
Robert Kennedy, thanks for taking a minute. Simple question.
Tucker,
It's good to see you. Listen,
you're a Bitcoin maximalist. You're Bitcoin forever.
I hate this central bank digital currency.